So with me right now is a beautiful blue-tongued skink. So us reptile keepers are lucky because these guys are becoming much more popular in the pet trade and the reptile trade, and they're being bred by more people. Hopefully they won't be overbred, kind of like how bearded dragons have been. But speaking of bearded dragons, their diets aren't very different from those of a bearded dragon. But today we're going to be talking about blue-tongued skink diets. So I wanted to be able to do some care videos on blue-tongued skinks, but because there's just so much to know, I'm going to need to break it up into multiple videos. So this first one is going to be all about their diet. So yeah, it's a bit more complicated than other animals, like much more complicated than maybe a leopard gecko or a snake, but it's not too hard and it's actually pretty fun to prepare food for them. So blue tongues need, basically, they almost have a food chart, kind of like a person. They're gonna need protein, greens, veggies, fruit, and all that stuff, and I'm gonna go over all of it in this video. So the first part of the diet that we're going to be looking at is protein. So protein is something you're going to want to be getting into your blue tongue. It's going to be about 40% of their diet. And I'm going to be showing you how to do so with live feeder insects, but you also have a few other choices. So right here are dubia roaches. These guys are possibly the most healthy feeder insect on Earth right now, and they're easily available now. They are a little bit on the expensive side compared to crickets or mealworms, but they are much more healthy for your animal, so it's a good choice. They come in a ton of different sizes. You can get them very small up to very large, so you can always be feeding them to your blue tongue. There'll always be a size that works for them. But yeah, like I said, these guys are naturally very healthy with vitamins and tons of protein and not too much fat. And then we've got mealworms right here. These are probably actually my favorite to use. They're just really easy to keep and they're not too expensive. And they also work, but you need to add some extra things to these, which I'll be talking about later. Now, what some people do is feed their blue tongues wet dog food or wet cat food. This is an option. I did this for a little while with mine. Specifically, I did the dog food, wet dog food, where it was a beef, chicken, and liver mix, I believe. But I decided to stop using this because this can potentially give them mouth rot. Now, this is a big pain to cure, basically, and you can avoid it by not really giving them too much of that dog food. You still can, or cat food, but again, you do have a couple risks because it's not quite as healthy as live insects and stuff. So it's better to go with it. You also can't really get the wet dog or cat food in very small portions, so you might, if you only have one blue tongue, you're not gonna really be able to use it all because it'll spoil and get old. Unlike these. These, of course, will age, but they'll continue to live, so you can use them at different times. But yeah, I choose to avoid the wet dog and cat food. So mealworms and dubia roaches are probably your best bet for that 40% of protein. Next, you've got greens. Right here, I've got a raw collard green. You have multiple choices when it comes to the greens. You can also use maybe dandelion greens and beet greens, different things like that. You can also do kale. Kale doesn't have as much nutrition, but I think collard greens are the best way to go. You can also do variety. Variety is always good with the when it comes to greens and just everything, but I usually do collard greens because it's not very expensive, it's easy to get, you can get a lot of it, and it lasts a pretty long time, surprisingly. Now, blue tongues can actually be picky. They might not like their greens, and that's the most common thing for blue tongues to refuse to eat, but I'll show you how to basically fix that and get them to eat it later on. Finally, that last about 10% can be filled with fruits and veggies and a few other things. Right here, I've got a strawberry and blueberries, and these aren't actually very healthy. They do have some vitamins, but I'm gonna show you why that's a good thing to add into their diet later. I also have an egg here. You can give them raw or I believe cooked egg, but I usually do raw egg. This isn't something you want to do often, maybe just once or twice a month, kind of as an extra treat, and it can fill their food up a bit more. Finally, we've got supplements here. I've got 3 kinds of supplements: the calcium with D3, calcium without D3, and a multivitamin for reptiles and amphibians. So I learned about this more often. I've been putting a lot of research into the different kinds of supplements, and it turns out the vitamin D3, as some of you have told me, is not always good for reptiles, and it's something you actually want to avoid. So I actually no longer use this, and I stick to these 2. So this is calcium without D3, made by ZooMed, and the Herptivite multivitamin made by RepCal. So we've gone over everything, but now I'm going to show you how to basically prepare a meal for your animal. So the amount of food you give your animal also matters. Juveniles, you're going to want to feed more often as they grow. So when they're just a few months old, you might want to feed them daily or every other day. As they grow and get older, maybe not quite a year, but almost a yearling, maybe feed them like 4 or 5 times a week. And then as an adult, you can feed them maybe 2 to 3 times a week, I'd say. And for the older ones, that can be maybe that can be a few tablespoons of food in each feeding. For the younger ones, you're not going to want to give them that much, but it won't hurt to give them quite a bit because blue tongues will eat a lot of food. So the first thing that you're going to want to do, that I usually do, is add the collard greens, or whatever greens you're using. Again, this should be about half of their diet. So what I'm going to do is just simply break a piece off and really break it into small pieces. Again, blue tongues aren't usually a very big fan of this. And the reason I'm putting it at the bottom is she might accidentally eat some of it while she's eating the stuff that she likes, and it'll get stuck to the other food, which is good. So that looks good. I've just got a good bit of broken up collard greens in there, or whatever kinds of greens we'll be using. And next I'll go ahead and do, I'm gonna be doing mealworms today. So mealworms, or whatever protein you're doing, should be about 40%. So I'll kind of just even that out, just like that. I think that'll be good. That's about 15 mealworms or so, take out the dead ones. So they really do love their mealworms, or whatever insect you're feeding them, so that'll help her eat those collard greens. So next I'm gonna show you where fruit comes in. Blue tongues often really like their fruit. So I've got some blueberries and strawberries, like I think I might have said. And again, they don't have very much nutrition for them, so you don't wanna give too much of this. But, let's see, let's get a blueberry. And I'll put it on the table up here. So you'll see, once she smells it, she just immediately took the blueberry. I'll just go ahead and give her these. I won't add them into the food, but they really love that. So adding that to the food can help get them to eat those things that they don't really like the collard greens. So I'm gonna put the strawberry into her food to help entice her to eat it. I'm gonna move her first. And I'm just gonna finally cut this strawberry. I recommend getting the frozen fruits that you can, because although they'll be mushier, that's actually a good thing because it'll be easier for them to eat, but it'll last longer because you might not go through it very fast. So I'm just gonna give her a little bit of this. You don't necessarily, if they eat their other food just fine without these fruits, then you can just kind of avoid the fruits and maybe just give it to them as a treat every so often. It shouldn't be a big part of their diet. We're gonna put that aside, and I'll go ahead and give her some egg. Again, this isn't something you should give them often either. This is just kind of a treat, maybe once or twice a month, and I won't give her all of it. I'll just put a little bit on top. But this does have some good things in there. Your fingers might get a little bit messy. All right, so now we've got this kind of mush coming together, but it's got a lot of healthy stuff in there for her. So finally, I'm gonna do multivitamins. So usually what you wanna do with multivitamins is base it on, a mealworm escaped. Try and base it on a 3 or 4 day cycle, or not day cycle, but 3 or 4 feeding cycle. So you're gonna wanna give them more calcium than multivitamins. I feed her 3 times a week, so what I do is I feed her calcium 2 of those times and multivitamin 1 of those times. Today is a calcium day for her, so what I'm gonna do is just open this calcium without the D3 onto her food. Again, you can do just the same thing with the multivitamin, which I won't be doing today. I'll be doing her next feeding. So about 2 or 3 times calcium to about 1 time multivitamin. So here you can see the food that I have prepped for her today. It is about half greens and then a good bit of the live insects, and then I have added the supplements that she'll have today and a couple other fruits to get her to eat that food. You also have more choices for fruits and veggies. You can do strawberries, apple, blueberries, and then veggies you can do carrots and all sorts of things. I don't want to have to name it all here, but I'll have some links so that you can see just tons of food that they can have. But basically I've shown you kind of their chart of how much you want to eat of each thing, and now I'll let Olive enjoy her dinner for today.